Kristine, remember when you were a kid and you thought that your career was going to be this like perfect straight line trajectory?
Oh my, yes. That is not at all what happened. It ended up being way more of a squiggle than I could have ever imagined. And I am so happy that I embraced all of the squiggles along the way. Welcome to Embrace the Squiggle podcast, where we uncover the hidden gems of career transformation, one unfiltered squiggly adventure at a time. We are Kristine
And Colleen.
And this is episode 6 with Jen Oliver. So excited to have you here, Jen.
I am so excited. Thank you, lady.
You're welcome. You were top of the list, actually, because when I was here in November, it was a no-brainer to have you join us.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So I want to start with you telling your version of the story of how we're connected.
Hey, fun, actually. Okay, well, funny enough, I've probably known you now for over 20 years, which is crazy to think that. You are the sister of one of my very longtime besties who I went to college with at Queen's University in Kingston. So your sister Jill was one of our more far away people because she was from BC in Ontario, and we're like, cool. I had never been to BC back then. And I knew she had 3 siblings and whom she loved and talked about all the time. So I was excited to meet you. I probably met you at some point during those years, but I don't think I had met you really for years after knowing her. And then I think it wasn't until your mom and dad had a place in the desert, in Palm Desert, and Jill and I, after we finished university, I was in Ontario, she was in BC. And I was like, well, I could come all the way out there, or you could come here, but why don't we meet down in California where your parents have a house? There's an idea. So we started going down there. So I got to have a really great opportunity to get to know your parents. And I definitely went out to Vancouver a few times and probably met you there. But you and I really hooked up probably a few years ago, more on a solid basis, because you would come down to the desert and I moved to California about 5 years ago. And we would connect and we'd go hiking and hanging and hot tubbing. And we got to build a really great relationship. So I'm super grateful for Jill and your family. And of course, you now. So thank you. And congratulations on this podcast. So excited.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I slid right in there, stole you from my sister, share you with my sister now. Sure. Yeah, I was just remembering too, being down here. You weren't here, but your mom was here. And we did happy hour, which was super fun. We did a hike and then happy hour, the two of us. So I know, I feel like Olivia's kind of my California mom.
Aww.
I adore her too.
Thank you.
So great. Such a great story. So why don't we just start with you walking us through what was it when you were little, like maybe your daughter's ages now. What did you think you wanted to be when you were a kid?
You know what? That is actually a really good question, because I would say most people that I know had a pretty good idea of what they wanted to be, not only when they were a child, even though there's so many iterations from the time you're a kid to becoming an adult. But I would have to say, I graduated from Queen's with 2 degrees. I did a thesis. I had so much information and I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to be. So, or do, or anything. So I used to, when I was first thinking about it when I was a kid, I know the first thought back that I can remember was when I was 5 years old and I held my baby brother when he was born and I knew I wanted to be a mom. That was as far as I got in terms of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because I knew it was mom, and then anything else kind of had to fit around that or fit in that or work around, because I just loved my little brother. I had a little sister too, but she was closer, so I don't remember as much. But I remember holding him and just thinking, this is the best to have this little baby of your own, which I thought he was my own at the time. So I just used to take care of him. And I just loved it. So I knew I always wanted to be a mom. And it probably wasn't till about maybe 10 years after that, when I was around 16, 17, and I started getting into training through basketball. I started doing like conditioning kind of stuff in the park, in the gym, that I really thought, hey, you know what? I really like the idea of being a personal trainer. And I just thought that was kind of the be all and end all. And so funny enough, with your sister Jill, when we were at Queen's, we took our personal training certifications together when we were about 20. And I started right away training people at the university. So whether it was professors or doctors, lawyers, whoever was kind of around the university, I used to start training them. And then I was also doing all the training programming for our basketball team because I played on the Queen's basketball team for 5 years. So I had a really great time doing that. And that was really the first time that I sunk my teeth into something and was like, okay, I can see myself doing this. And it really played into the things that I loved, which was helping people, inspiring people to their greatness, and seeing that when people change little things in their lives, their whole life changed and their whole outlook changed. And I found fitness and health behaviors in general to be a really crucial instrument in creating overall happiness, wellness, well-being, mental health. And so that led me to study that. So when I was at Queen's, I started out thinking, similar to you, actually, I had remembered listening to you talk about that you wanted to take all the courses and do all the things and make sure you kept all your options open. That was totally me. I took so many things, including calculus and physics. Even in my first year at Queen's, I did calculus and I was like, what am I doing? Like, it didn't take long after that to figure out that was just a bad call. And I really need to kind of hone in. So I got really into psychology at that point. That was my favorite year or first year class was psychology. And then I realized that there was a program called Physical and Health Education. And I was like, that's my jam. So I went into that, which was really kinesiology. So I learned anatomy, physiology, all those kinds of things, and just love that. So kept going through there. And then I really started to hone in on the combination of the mind and the body with the psychology and with the physical body. I really got into that because I noticed this intersection of those two things and how kind of related they were. And really, in most academia back then, this is going back over 20 years now, it was very much mind, body, not together. It was separate. It was, we either work with the mind or we work with the body. And I really started to notice, hey, there's a lot of intersection between these two. I think we should really kind of connect these. So I started doing my own research, got really into that. And once I graduated, lo and behold, had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And the one thing that I used to say all the time to anyone who asked me what I was doing, I would say, my job has not been invented yet. That was my standard line. I was like, you know
I
what?
love
I
that.
went to this great university. Yeah, I did all these things. Yeah, I have all these skills and knowledge, but at the end of the day, I really don't know what that job title is. And so when I was kind of going through that period of my life, I just remember being so insecure. That was the biggest thing after I graduated, was feeling like I just don't want anyone to ask me, like, what am I doing? What do I do? That was like the worst question anyone could ask. I would just not answer it and go start asking them questions. I would change the subject. I would just do anything. And by this time I was 24 years old and just really had no idea what I was going to do. So I did what I knew and I went to a gym, Good Life Fitness, which is a big chain of gyms in Canada. And I went and applied as a personal trainer. And I thought, well, until I figure out what I want to do, perhaps graduate work, perhaps, get a job that I would like or whatever, I just started personal training. But when I went for the interview as a personal trainer at this gym, by my second interview, that they had like a series of 4 interviews, I think, they ended up offering me the job of the general manager of the whole gym.
Of course they did.
Yeah, I had no experience at all with that, but they seemed to really feel that I had a sense of leadership that they were looking for at the gym. The gym really didn't have a good leadership situation going on at the time. And so they said, yeah, you'd be a great personal trainer, but how about you oversee everything? And I was like, okay, I was up to the challenge and it was a job with a salary. And I was like, I'm in, look at me go. So I thought that was just the most fun for about the first year. And then I was like, okay, so managing people is not my jam after all. So I did learn a ton. That was one of the best experiences, to be 100, because I learned, budgeting. I learned we had over millions of dollars that we were dealing with in terms of our budget. I led the sales team. So I was teaching sales like every day for all that time. And I had no experience with that. And they had a really good sales training program. So I was heading it up and just learned a ton and was able to learn everything from firing and hiring and just HR, all the things that I had to do. I kind of ran the whole thing. So that was great. That was really fun. So
I just want to jump in for a second. Yeah. I would love to know a little bit more about the moment, that aha moment that you had when you knew people leadership wasn't your thing
Mm.
because I'm making an assumption. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are, well, number one, are curious, but number two, I think a lot of people think that they have to be in leadership. And we all know, I can speak from experience, and I'm sure Colleen can too, not everybody is meant to be a leader, and that's okay. But I feel like there's so much pressure put on society to be a people leader or to move into what they call leadership.
Totally.
So I would
Well,
love to hear just a
I
little bit
agree,
more about that moment.
and the thing is that I think stood out, it wasn't that I didn't want to lead, it was that I didn't want to manage. That was kind of more the distinction, I would say. I was like, there was two things. One was my gym was only about 2 hours away from the head office of Good Life Fitness. And at the time there was like, let's say 150 gyms or something. And then over the years I was there was probably over 200 gyms. So they were popping up gyms and buying gyms and taking over gyms all over the place. And no one had ever really come to visit our gym. Like there was a couple, here and there, but I was like, we're 2 hours away. We went from not doing well to really doing well. I'm working my head off like day and night for this 24 hours fitness gym, and no one is noticing. And I thought, I know how to work hard. I know how to get things done. I know how to actually do the things that I'm meant to do. And I'm not feeling appreciated. I'm not feeling compensated. And then I looked to my boss, my most direct boss, who was kind of the divisional manager of all the gyms in our sort of district. And she was running around more like a chicken with her head cut off. And she had children at the time that she wasn't able to see much of. They were in there every Saturday and Sunday with us, trying to get sales and things. And I was like, this ladder is not the one I want to climb. So that was really the wake up call, was like, okay, I know how to work. I want to work for me because I want to make sure that I'm in charge of what's going on, and then I can follow through. I don't need to ask someone to do it 48 times and then it's mediocre. So I'm just going to do it myself. And so it was really my sense of personal leadership that I felt I was able to take to the next level. And then I knew I didn't want to manage people, especially, I would say, people we couldn't pay that much. And so the turnover was high. The income that they were getting was like, if I don't show up for work, ain't no thing, I don't care. And I was like, okay, this is not working. So I really felt like I was ready to kind of step into something that I had more personal control over. And the way the gym industry is set up, it's very much a matter of, hey, let's get new clients, and not, hey, are these clients coming in, getting health benefits, getting the results that we are supposedly promising them. It's just get more new ones. Who cares if they don't come in? And I was like, this is not my value system. This is not going to fly for me. So I kept wanting to call the old ones, and they're like, find new leads. I'm like, let's take care of those ones. So it was kind of that. So once I figured that out, I was like, okay, I need to find a position for me that is more hands-on with the actual clients that I was going to be able to affect change with. And so that was when the big pivot came. And again, I still I don't know, was kind of my main motto of life. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, but I knew that I wanted more education, specifically on the psychology of health and exercise. So I ended up taking the GMATs and taking, extra courses and whatnot to try and figure out what I was going to do. And I ended up doing a master's degree in exercise and health psychology. So it was in the kinesiology department. However, it was really focused on behavior and behavior modification. How do people adopt and maintain healthy behaviors over time? And so that became my main focus. So I followed up with a 2-year master's and a thesis where I really looked at willpower, self-regulation, how were people actually monitoring themselves, getting into habits, and then maintaining them, and where would they drop off, right? It wasn't just enough for me to crunch the numbers from the gym. I really wanted to get in there and actually be a part of their experience.
I love it. Amazing. So where did your master's degree take you? What was next?
Well, you know what? Funny enough, That's a really good way of saying it. Where did it take me? Because I was living in Windsor, Ontario at the time, which is just about 4 hours south of Toronto. And then my master's was in Hamilton. So it was about 3 hours away on the good old 401 that I got to know really well because I was still working at Good Life for a little bit of the time. And my boyfriend, now husband at the time I was living with, in Windsor. So I was driving back and forth to McMaster, not even knowing that that was going to be one of the biggest catalysts to what created the rest of my life, because I got really into listening to podcasts and talk radio. And this is back in 2007. I went back and did my degree. So I think about 3 to 4 months into my master's degree, I was listening to so much talk radio, and it was like interesting. Like it was like coaches on the radio, on Sirius XM radio. I remember Mel Robbins was one of my favorites back then. She was on Sirius XM. This is 2007, 2008. And I used to listen to her, and every day I was driving hours and hours back and forth every week. And I was like, I could do this. I could talk about the stuff I'm learning, right?
Yes, you can.
And, podcast was only invented in 2004, and I graduated 2005 and then started again the master's. So it was only within the first 4 years of the invent of podcasting in general that I was right. My job hadn't been invented yet. And there I was. So the first thing I did was start my own podcast in 2008. So I started a podcast called Kaizen with Jen, which Kaizen is a Japanese principle of continuous improvement, small incremental changes that add up over time. And I really found that the stuff that I was learning in my master's degree, I could just speak to, and I could apply it to everyday living. And I started this podcast, and within a few weeks, I was getting emails and notes from people all over the world saying, "Oh, I really like your podcast." And meanwhile, I was sending the link to my mom and people I knew, and nobody even knew how to work it. And I was like, well, people found me all over the world, so I don't know about you. So that was really kind of the beginning of realizing, hey, you know what? I don't need to go find a job. I can actually create something that does not yet exist and have much more control over it and have much more freedom. And it was really actually when I was working at Good Life and just 24 hours of the day that I realized freedom was probably my biggest value. And it was the one that I had none of at that time. So I thought, I don't care how much you pay me. I know I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. And this is going to be the kind of point that I'm going to go head my little direction to. So so that podcast was the beginning. So I did the podcast for a few years while I was doing my master's. And then I moved back to Windsor because my husband was a basketball coach at the University of Windsor. So he was kind of set there. So I went back there, and then soon thereafter, I started my own business. And my first business was called Live for You. And it was just that. It was personal health and fitness coaching. I did a nutrition degree, and I was really into helping people with their habits and to help them understand, what was really going on and how taking care of certain physical habits would help them in all different areas of their life.
What was the biggest lesson that you learned, launching as an entrepreneur?
Oh, gosh. Well, there's a lot of squiggle, as you ladies will say. It is not a linear direction. You are going to go up, you are going to go down. And I would say the biggest thing now, this is almost again 15 years later, I would say looking back, the biggest lesson would be sticking with it. Because there are many, many hard times, whether it's posting on social media regularly, writing regular articles, or trying to connect on podcasts or do things. It's like, there's so many times where you're like, what is this all for? Who really cares? Does anybody actually hear me? And so there's just all that. But at the end of the day, sticking with it and really having that belief that what you have to say, what you have to share is important enough. And I think it comes from us within. I mean, it might come from your head where you're like, oh, I should quit. Oh, this is annoying or boring or hard. Or why don't I just, I don't know how many times I've thought, God, I wish I was a barista at Starbucks. Like I could just go to work, do the thing, chat with some people, wave around some lattes and hit home. But it's just not in me, and it wasn't going to fulfill me. And I think every time I did step away and say, okay, I need a break, or, I just have to rejig things because they're not really going the way I want. It was like, there was just this pull where it was like, yeah, you could go get a job. Yeah, you could go do these other things. But you know what? this is your destiny. This is what you're meant for. And that came from within my intuition. And it was like, there was no quieting that voice down. Like the little voices of, oh yeah, you suck, or this isn't good. Those words were actually able to be quieted down by that intuition, which was the knowing that I was meant for doing this. And I wouldn't be satisfied and I wouldn't be living the life that I was meant to live if I wasn't out there, sharing my message, so to speak.
Yeah.
Sounds like you were self-coaching yourself with all of those, building the little habits and all the things that you help your clients with.
Totally. And I know you two are both coaches, and I just am such a believer in the coaching field. I mean, I started out, like I said, as an athlete, and I had tons of coaches in basketball and sports, etc. But I really didn't know that coaching could be a thing. And so once I started exploring that during my master's degree, like example, Mel Robbins was a coach, and I could see that she was out there talking and doing things. And I thought, okay, so that's when I started exploring doing coaching certifications. And it was like, I even remember my mom saying, Jennifer, no one's going to pay you for that. And I thought, she doesn't know. She doesn't know what she's talking about. How many times you say that to your mom, right? And I mean, she was just trying to keep me safe, right? But it was like, I had a knowing that there was a way that I was able to help people, and it wasn't a conventional way. And so I started learning coaching strategies right up at that point. And so for over 15 years, I've been learning about coaching, and I'm I would say a definite lifelong learner, and I can't not read books and keep expanding my knowledge. And I know that every time I read a book, it's like I utilize that information that week, that day. That's exactly what the client needed to hear. And I just feel like it's such a great world to be in, because it's professional development, it's personal development, it's all the time. And so there's definitely moments where I'm like, okay, or the people around me are like, okay, let's stop growing for a little here, Jen. But I just can't. It's just in me. I just got to.
So you are in a phase right now of relaunching, and in the same breath, I don't want to skim over your squiggly journey to today.
The squiggly one.
It's squiggly. It's because there is just, I know, because I get to spend one-on-one time with you, there are so many nuggets. And I know that I leave our desert hill hikes and I'm just like, I have to just sit with our conversations because they're so powerful, so impactful. So just, can you walk us through your entrepreneurial adventure?
Yes.
And then I know that there is sort of a phase of your most recent life that I know our listeners would be very grateful to hear about. So just walk us through to today.
Yes, yes. So I would say going back to when I was first starting my business, like I said, I started Live for You shortly after I finished while I was doing my master's. And so I graduated from that 2009. And then I would say there was a couple years there where I was really just working one-on-one in person with people. They would come to my house, or I would, do phone calls with them, and we would do coaching, whether it was fitness, nutrition. I would do some personal training with them as well. I was doing personal training at boutique gyms around the city that I was living in at the time, and just working out people as a part of that. So I really love the hands-on. And I found that was kind of my passion at the beginning. But then what I realized probably shortly thereafter was just how much more I could affect more change being able to work online as well. So this was around 2010, 2011. And, online stuff was just kind of beginning back then. It wasn't, we didn't have Zoom and whatnot back then. I don't think, anyways. I know I wasn't using it. But anyway, so, that was kind of where I was like, that was the beginning of a struggle point where I was like, I'm about to have kids. I knew I really wanted kids shortly after getting married, which was in 2009. And so that was kind of my main thing, was like, I want to be with my baby. So how am I going to have these people all around and doing things and going out to the gym and yada, yada. So that was kind of the first point where I was like, okay, I have to figure out a better way. And so I started basically figuring out that better way by just starting to say, how did I want to set up my days? How did I want my days to look? And once I had a baby, it really became she consumed all my time. And as any mom knows, yeah, you really don't have any after that. So that was kind of the first point where I was like, okay, I need to start figuring something else out, whether it's creating programs or whether it's doing something where I'm not trading time for money. That was kind of a really aha moment at the time. And so that was tough. It took me a few years to figure that out and how exactly I was going to do all that. And by then I had 2 children. So I kind of was just taking clients and doing things to just kind of keep going during the times when I had babies. So my second daughter was born in 2013. And I was still doing a little bit of personal training. I'd get out. It was actually kind of nice to get out of the house for a few hours. I was like, now this is my speed. Gets to take a break. So working was a nice break. But then, unfortunately, but now looking back, very fortunately, I ended up getting and sustaining a very horrible back injury because after I had my babies, I, started going back to the gym pretty soon after, doing all the things that I thought I could do this before. So why can't I do this now? And lo and behold, my back was like, nope, thank you for coming, but no thanks. So I ended up getting such a bad back injury. I literally couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't pick my kids up. I couldn't bend over and wash them in the bath. I couldn't really do anything. So that was kind of the biggest rupture of my life at the time I'd ever had. Like my whole identity was my physical abilities, that I was able to go and work out. And I was teaching, fitness in the park with strollers and the whole thing. And then once I hurt my back, I couldn't move and had to really, really rethink everything. And that was both the hardest time of my life at the time and also the most wonderful time, because I was like, you know what, if I'm a personal trainer and I'm out there training people and I've had babies and I don't know how to actually make sure no one's injuring themselves, what about all the other trainers? Do they know? And so as I started researching more into the core, more into what really happened with my back, more into the pelvic floor and the inner core muscles, I started taking courses. I remember I went to Toronto for an amazing training course that was about 3 days. And I remember leaving my 1-year-old at the time, or even less, and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so hard to leave her, but I need to learn this information. I mean, people don't know this, and everybody can get a back injury or a pelvic floor injury. And incontinence at the time was something that's like, oh, you've had babies? Sure, you're going to pee your pants, move on. And I was like, really? Okay, I don't want to pee my pants. Okay, I don't want that to be just move on. And so I really wanted to dive into it. So serendipitously, through my back injury, I ended up really becoming an expert in the deep inner core. And I completely kind of switched my business, which was Live for You at the time, into creating a business called FitMama and teaching new moms how to rehabilitate their core, explain to them how the core and pelvis worked, how it changed during pregnancy, how to rehabilitate it, because effectively most people were blowing out their knee and running a marathon the next day is how I looked at it, with the way we were doing birthing. You go back after 6 weeks, your doctor may or may not even do an internal exam. And they're like, sure, go run, sure, go lift weights, sure. And it's like lifting your baby is enough at that time. And we aren't prepared physically and as well mentally, emotionally, to be able to actually do the things that our bodies need us to do to build what I call a stronger foundation. And then from there, I mean, I truly believe that we can be stronger and healthier and fitter after we have babies than ever before. But I really found that it was kind of a general consensus of our culture that, hey, once you've had a baby, you're going to be weak, or once you've had a baby, you're going to have this, belly or problem or issue or peeing or whatever all your life. And so the more I learned about it and the more I started sharing about it, that's when I really started sharing on social media. Facebook, I think I was on, but I was just like popping pictures of my kids before that. And then I started being like, hey, do you know? Hey, I started teaching workshops in gyms in the local area. I started teaching trainers because I really found that this education piece was the biggest piece lacking. And not everyone could go take 3-day courses and do all the things to learn all this stuff. So that became a really empowering point and a really differentiating point in my business, so that I was able to really get specific with my clients. And so I had my own healing journey, which is just enough squiggle for 2 books. But I went on a healing journey that lasted me probably close to 3 years. And first, it just started with so many practitioners. I was like, I know all the best practitioners. I'm going to go to that guy and this lady and this, and nothing helped. Nothing helped.
So
And
frustrating.
It was
right?
the
And I
most
think
frustrating.
so
It was
many women experience that, right? Like
yes.
particularly post-birth. I had an
Yes.
almost 10-pound baby, and I remember leaving the hospital and they gave me a piece of paper that said, "Don't lift anything more than 8 pounds." And I'm
Yeah.
like, but
So
the
what?
kid is almost 10 pounds. Like who's
Exactly.
lifting the baby when I'm home alone
Thank
with her,
you.
right?
Exactly. Yeah, my hired help that I have here
Oh
24/7, of
yes.
course,
My
right?
teams of, night
Exactly.
nurses that came in.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very unrealistic setup for women, and it's such a lack of education and understanding and support. And I just delved into that world head on, and I was like, okay, I need to help people. So that became really exciting, and my own healing journey allowed me to discover so many things about myself, so many things about my mentality. I think that's the biggest thing, because as an athlete, we have this really no pain, no gain kind of mentality. And that was what got me far. That was what got me through my basketball career. It got me to be the GM of the gym and all the things. But once I had a baby, that was not working anymore. It was like all pain all the time and no gain. Like there was nothing gained. So I was really, I was set on a mission to figure out what I was going to be able to do to actually help people prevent this, not only help them after this was only happening. So that was kind of a huge part for me, was just getting into understanding that the number one thing for me was this full steam ahead really had to take a back seat. And it was like every time I wanted to go hard, it was about slowing down. And so I started to find that a lot of the clients that I was attracting were clients who had the same mentality, who were like, okay, I have all these things to do and I know I want to go to my fitness class, but like when my baby sleeps, like I'm so tired, I want to go to sleep. And I'm like, so sleep. And they're like, what? My
It's
coach
the
is telling me this, my trainer. And they just thought, I don't understand. I'm wrong. I'm bad. What should I do? What should I pick? And it was just such an internal struggle. So that was really what led me down the path after I had, I would say, quote unquote, healed, which took a lot of time, a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, what it really came down to was retraining my inner core, how to breathe properly and how to actually utilize the muscles of my pelvis, hips, quads, hip flexors, lower back, upper back, all the muscles to actually support myself. Go figure. And here I was looking outside of myself for so long to figure out everybody else had the answer for me. And of course, as you ladies know, it's right in here all
We have
along.
all the answers. And I love that you just touched upon learning to give yourself permission and, and sending that message out to others. Because I know for me, and I'm probably speaking for Colleen here, but that I also attract a very specific profile of client, and none of them know how to give themselves permission to do
No.
anything when we start work, at the beginning of the time that we work together. And,
Yeah.
Even just that moment of asking them that question, what will it take for you to give yourself permission to sit on the couch for half an hour and just read a
I know.
book or
Yeah.
have just
And it
me
seems like the
time?
craziest idea to them. Like it really
Oh,
does seem like it's actually
I
out of
mean,
this world. I could never do that and actually
no,
succeed.
I
And
was
that's our
like that.
culture, right? That's our society. And so what I
Yes.
really taught, that was the big thing. It was like there's exercise, and then I kind of created this new term I call inner size. And so there was like this complement to exercise and this external thing that we always have to do and use our body for some thing that we need to accomplish. Whereas the inner size was just about slowing down, embracing where you're at, embracing. And it's funny that this podcast is Embrace the Squiggle, because embrace was the first third part, like the entire first third of my book was called Embrace. That was the head. And I was just all about helping women starting from the place of embracing where you're at, because the most problems, I'll call them, to come from us resisting what is, right? It's like, oh, I want my baby to be 10 years old so I can go out and do the gym or whatever. I want that, and we wish time to go away. We wish things were different. And then upon looking back, when your baby's 10, you're like, oh, I wish that baby was little again. And, it's just this whole mind warp thing that we go through. And so embracing was really the starting point I began at with every single client. And it was like, where are you at right now? Let's meet ourselves there, not at the place where we used to be 20 pounds less, or we used to this, or we want to this, or this is in the future or past. It's like, let's embrace the now. And then once we come from that place, we begin with a lot more self-compassion. We begin with a lot more love and respect for ourselves by not wishing it was some other time and wishing our body was some other way,
No,
Absolutely. I love one of my friends, Robin, who's the chief administrative officer for the New England Patriots, right? So
Oh,
kick-ass woman in a
yeah,
really
go for it.
high-level job in the NFL. But the first time I saw her speak at a conference, she said this line that I literally have had on a sticky note sitting here on my desk for years now that says, be great where your feet are, right?
Ooh,
Be great
yes.
where your feet are, right?
Love it.
Live where you are, right? Embrace where you are, be great at that moment. And even if it's not exactly where you want to be,
Yeah.
right? It kind of embrace the now and be great at this moment in time for you and where you're at. And
Yeah.
it's just such one of those quotes that has stuck with me. And it's a lot of what you're saying too, right? Like to embrace where you are, to be okay with where you are right now. And
Mhm.
yes, of course, have goals, move forward,
Yeah.
look at how you can improve, but also in that same vein, don't wish it away.
No, it
Right.
really is something you will look back on and regret. That I can guarantee for
Just the
sure.
power of pausing and just being with
Mhm.
what's
Yep.
showing up. I just love everything that you're saying, Jen, just around like the permission and the self-compassion and the self-respect. And we can't be those things to the outer world until we know how to be those things to ourselves.
Absolutely. It's so true. And we have all these expectations of people around us. I mean, just to even know what we want. Think about how many of us are like, oh, they'll help me. They know exactly what I need. But it's like, unless we give people, some real specific instructions, they don't know. And people in our lives, particularly partners or other children that we want to help us, parents, whomever, we are often so vague with them and we're like, they should just know what we need, and it's like, no, let's just get to the point where we know what we need and we can articulate that. And that was a huge part that I wrote about in my book too, was like, what do you actually need? Like, not what do you think you need or what other people think you need or what other people think they can provide for you, but like really actually understanding what you need. Because most of us, I mean, that's one of the first questions I would honestly ask a client, what do you need? What do you want? Those two things. And I would say the majority of them cannot answer that.
So Jen, I heard you mention your book twice. So tell us, what is
Yes,
your
and I'm
book?
looking, I
Give
thought
me-
I had it here that I was going
Right.
to show you, but yeah, in 2017, I published a book. So after I did all this and I worked with my clients, on those fitness aspects, on the mental health, on the inner size, on the pelvic health and core, I was like, okay, I need to put this all in one place so people can understand it. And so the Love FitMama Way was born. So that's what the book title is. And it's all about transforming the core of motherhood. So again, these core cultural things that we just buy into and we just take for granted without really thinking. And so I really the whole book is about embracing, as I mentioned, then nurturing yourself and then enjoying. So I really wanted people to realize this is not an uphill battle and a struggle all your life. This is not about beating yourself into submission or doing those old no pain, no gain. My thing was no pain, all gain. So really listening to your body, really starting to hear the cues, because so often we just tune it out. We're spending so much time in our head in this mental pillar up here where we think, and then we never get into the heart or our emotional pillar, which has a lot of information for us. And then we never go down deeper into our intuition, which has the most information to us. So those are really muted. So a lot of what I teach is just how to get through the fog and the noise of that busy, bossy mind and dip down in deeper into our heart and into our core. So now I always say, go from hardcore to heartcore. And so it
Love
allows
it.
you to get deeper into your body. Yeah.
I love it. You have the best sayings. Oh my goodness. I wish I could record some of our past conversations.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. That podcast would have 1 million downloads in a hot second. Okay, so you wrote a book. You've got a second book that you completely forgot about,
Yes.
that you
Okay.
started
So great
writing.
point. Yeah. So I had written the book in 2017. And then soon thereafter, I got an opportunity to do a TEDx talk, which I was really excited to do because I wanted to do speaking at the time. I was already speaking at a few conferences. I was invited to do a few talks. I did talks locally at different venues and stuff. And then the opportunity to do a TEDx talk came. And so I jumped on that. I applied. I did all the things and ended up going to do this TEDx talk that was 17 minutes long. And it ended up having about 50 to 100 people in the audience, I believe, because it was the first or second time that the city had done it. So there's certain rules on how many people can be in the audience.
Right.
But I did that talk and it was released on YouTube in May of 2018. And now, last checked, it has over 2.6 million views on that talk, which
Amazing.
I am beyond grateful for because I shared this message in it. I shared all about that hardcore stuff and I shared, a big message of self-love. And I think before there was this big misconception that self-love is very narcissistic and it's like, oh yeah, I'm great. And it's like, women did not have that version of self-love. They had the version of, I am my own worst enemy. And if I don't beat myself up into submission, then I'll never get anywhere in life. And I just really wanted to just flip the script on that and give women another way to look at things. And so I really loved talking about that. That one's called How to Love Yourself to the Core. And I think that was something that at the time and even still ongoing is something that people are really wanting to really understand is like, before I know a lot in the fitness industry or in nutrition world or weight loss and diet and all that whole world, it became so toxic because it was like, examples of like things like The Biggest Loser. It was like that, oh, we have to yell at these people to get fit and we have to just strict food and all these just things that were very archaic in my opinion and did not promote positive mental health. It didn't promote, anybody actually having a good time or enjoying any of it. And so I really wanted to say, hey, there's just a different way and we can just start approaching it differently. And so not talking to ourselves negatively and just starting to be our own best ally instead. And I think that really was empowering to a lot of people, men and women alike. And it was just something that people were really ready to start to embrace because the other way just didn't feel good anymore. And I think our world was changing into a way where it was like, yeah, that's just not working anymore. I don't think that's going to go very well anymore. So yeah, so that was 2018. And then my dream, in addition to being a mom since I was a baby, was to live in the warmth since I was a baby, because I do not like the cold. And as a Canadian, I went to school in Kingston, Ontario. I lived in Ottawa, which is probably the two of the coldest places that I've ever been known to be. The winds, like minus 40 Celsius. When I tell people here in America that, there's like, I don't even understand that. Like, I don't understand how this is even possible. So it was horrible. And I really didn't like the cold. I was not one to embrace winter sporting, flying down a hill, not my speed. I was not wanting to do that. So I really just thought, okay, I want to move to California. So it was about 2008 when I talked to my husband and said, hey, we got to move down south. Like, I don't know where, but we got to go and we got to figure out how to move to the States because it's warm down there and they have beaches and they have palm trees and we don't have any here. So we need to go. So that was a really long process. And so that started in 2008 with him applying to a visa. He ended up getting the visa. And then actually in 2014, he started his own business, started his own podcast in 2018, and then soon thereafter was able to retire himself from his job at the university as a basketball coach. So we were now free of having to be anywhere in Canada specifically. So that was a real big treat because we were like, hey, where do we get to go? And we literally could go on a map of the world and choose where we wanted to live. And specifically, we wanted to live in California. So we started our house hunt online. We bought a house in California online and moved to one of the hottest places in the States, which is Palm Desert. So we loved that, moved there because it was just never going to snow. I was like, as long as it just never snows, like just take me there. And so we loved it there. It was a really, really amazing place. And we had the opportunity to build a backyard because our house that we had bought had just grass in the backyard. So we got to put a pool in, put a hot tub in, and put a basketball court in, which my husband's a basketball coach. As I mentioned, I was into basketball and our kids were into basketball. So we put in a basketball court and just started playing a lot of basketball. So that was a lot of fun. But one of the biggest things at that point in time was that I had felt I had moved on from my back injury. I had kind of moved through a bunch of different struggles I had had growing my business. And I was at a point where I was ready to continue the business, but I was also ready to continue growing my family and have more kids. And when I turned to my husband and said, "Hey, it's time," he was like, no, it's not time. And I was like, what? So that led to a whole nother rupture of my life and our lives in general, which took me on another whole healing journey that I had to go on, which it was a really self-discovery journey. And it ended up having me definitely step away from FitMama, the business itself. I was running the FitMama podcast for a couple of years by that point. And I just kind of stopped because I started just becoming triggered by everything that was, everybody I followed on Instagram, everybody I was helping was pregnant or babies or this or that. And it just kind of made me go, I don't want to be in that world at all anymore. And so that took me on a whole thing. However, I think what I got from that and what's really brought me back into everything so much stronger was really just the simple shift in perspective. Was at first I went through the stages of grief with that hard.
Yes.
So at first I was definitely in denial. I was like, absolutely not, we're doing this. And then by the time I got all the way through to acceptance, it was really a matter of doing a lot of work on myself, therapy, all the things. I was doing all the things that I was teaching in terms of meditation and breathing and all the things. But I think the biggest thing was the shift in perspective from this happened to me to this happened for me.
Yeah,
and it was
beautiful.
The same kind of twist that I had when I hurt my back. Because at first I was so mad and I thought, why is this happening to me? And then I figured out, well, this happened for me to be able to educate people on this, and look what it's become. And so this experience with not having more children really just changed so many things in my perspective in all my life. And I thought, okay, how is this going to inform me going further? And it totally has. It's given me so much opportunity to be able to help people again in different ways, because things are not always in our control and things are not always working out the way we thought. And, it just was not meant to be, and that's okay. And I learned a lot about regret. I learned a lot about forgiveness for not only myself, but, my husband, and different things where I was, so mad and so angry and so this and so that. And at the end of the day, it was really about, how can I utilize this experience to help more people? Because at the end of the day, I wanted more kids and couldn't have them. Well, how many people are in that boat? I don't know. 90% of people at some point in their life. There are many people who were never able to have kids. All the people with pregnancy loss, all the people with baby loss, all the people, I just realized I had no real perspective on all of that, just like I had no perspective on getting an injury that would stop you from doing certain things, So that was a really quite the journey that has taken me now, my whole life. But here I am to tell the story and coming back with, a renewed excitement and a really big sense of gratitude for where I am. And again, embracing what I did have was a huge thing, more versus, hey, look what I have right in front of me. And how can I really embrace and nurture and enjoy those aspects of my life right now? So.
Well, and I just want to actually pull from a conversation we had. I don't know. I've been coming back and forth from Vancouver to California so much recently that I can't remember which conversation it was. But I remember us talking about sort of your plans, and you had sort of some ideas and you were popcorning. And then I think I came back and we were, hiking the desert hills again. And you just looked at me and you said, I cannot believe that I was trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
And start from scratch.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm bringing this forward is, I've made a bit of a transition in terms of the profile of client that I'm working with, But when I was a little bit, this is sort of more Colleen's wheelhouse right now in terms of the pure career coaching, where people will come and work with us, or conversations that I've had in the past where they think that they have to start from scratch all the time. And they forget that they've got this foundation, and that they've got these buckets, and they've got this experience, and you can draw upon that in different ways. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because I just remember your energy and your excitement, and you just lit up when you looked at me and you said, why am I starting all over again?
Totally.
I've got
and it was
so much.
Part of it was that I had been getting triggered, for so long. And then so I was wanting to create a whole new business. It was like, I still want to help people, but I can't talk about the pregnancy and baby thing. Right. Because it was just too triggering for me. But then once I kind of moved through that and had my healing, it ended up just by chance, we decided to move from the desert in Palm Desert to LA. So just number of circumstances to that. And we moved to LA. It was exciting. It's amazing. It was a really big shift in perspective. And I had really been kind of trying to launch a few different things in business, whether I was doing like mind body coaching in other ways, but I wasn't sinking my teeth into it. And I did have such a big passion. So when I got to LA and, my youngest daughter's in 5th grade. Well, I was spending a lot of time in the lower school, meeting other families, all this stuff at the beginning of the school year. And I talked to a whole lot of moms that had younger babies, younger kids that had just had babies. And I couldn't not talk about it, what I knew. And then I found all these people still need help. All these people still don't know. And this is now 10 years removed from when I began this in Windsor. And now all these people still need me. And what am I doing thinking I need to go help people in some other domain when this is my wheelhouse? This is my passion. And so I started sharing my books again. I started, and then I would just get so excited. And I'm like, how can I not be talking about this? This is like my whole thing. So I just love, because it's so empowering when women learn about this stuff. They're like, how did nobody know this? How did nobody tell me this? My OB never told me that. And I'm like, I know, I understand. And this is where we can start. And so I think it was just kind of coming full circle, and both those things, me realizing there was a need for this, and then me having, the ability and the actual opportunity to be able to speak to this again.
What are you most excited about for 2024?
Well, as you had mentioned earlier, I'm writing my second book, which is really, really exciting to me. That is like the number one, because, I had started the book shortly after I wrote my last one and did the TED Talk. I had already created a book title page. Like I was like in the manifest mode, and I had written a bunch of notes. I had a program that I was including with it. So, but it had never really gone next because I had kind of stopped everything. And so when I thought about it, I thought, okay, I really want to write another book because there's so much I have to say about this. And now my book from 2017 is already 6 years old. This was last year. Now it's 24. I'm like, okay, I got more to say. I got to write another book. And I went back in my Google Drive and found so many old notes that I had written. I'm like, I was already doing this. And now how much better is it going to be? Because I've had 6 years of learning, experience, all the things. So I'm so grateful that I have that, because, I loved writing a book. I loved the experience of sharing the book. I love the experience of doing media tours and talks about the book, because that education piece is just, and then the other thing I'm really excited about is relaunching the FitMama Podcast, because I have over 100, I think it's 113 episodes of that out there. And I haven't recorded my own podcast or podcast interviews on the FitMama Podcast. And I have just a list of guests that is like a mile long. So I'm really excited to relaunch that and get that going again this year. Those are kind of my two huge overarching things. And that I won't do any other spoiler alerts, but I have a few other exciting things on the road. But yeah, I'm really excited. One of the biggest trainings that I've done, as I said, I always like to educate and train. One of my most recent trainings is on trauma-informed breath work. So I was already teaching breathing. I was already doing a lot with the nervous system. But this latest training that I did is just blown my mind, and how I can help people in that next level through breath work, through reconnecting to themselves. And of course, with something like breath, which we don't need any other equipment. We don't need to go buy a gym membership. We don't need to put our kid in daycare. We're just like, here it is. I got this. So that's what the next book is on. And it's really, really exciting for me to actually be doing breathwork sessions with people again, and working with them and teaching them from that place of knowing. It's not like, oh, I think I'm getting stronger. It's like they have a visceral reaction positive emotional and physical experience from even 2 to 3 minutes of breath work. So the more I've learned about it, the more I'm able to share that information and be able to have people even more empowered, because we realize, again, those tools are just all right here within us. So coming back to the heart and the core, it just is all meshing perfectly for me to be able to give women and anybody really these tools to be able to give them the opportunity to live their best life, really.
What a beautiful return. I'm so excited for you.
Oh, thank
What
you.
is your one piece of advice, career advice, entrepreneurial advice, life advice that you have for our listeners?
I would say this is a big one, and I always believe that we teach what we need to learn, and I'm still teaching it, still need to learn it, and that would be self-trust. I would say that's the biggest one. I was and still am looking to others. What are they doing? What is this? These people know better than me. The doctor knows, this knows. But like when we can trust ourselves, because that voice inside is telling us, and it's a knowing. A lot of the time, if we're thinking from our mind, it's usually societal, cultural things that we've been taught, which are not us or ourselves. And oftentimes when we're feeling or thinking from our emotional body, it's experiences, trauma, and it can be ups and downs, and it always has a story along with it. It's like, oh, I'm angry because of this, or oh, I'm anxious because of this. But when we get into that deep intuition and that knowing, there's no story. There's just a yes or a no. And when we trust that, and when we follow that, and when we go with that, you cannot steer yourself wrong.
No.
I love that. All right. So we always love to end our podcast with our fun rapid fire questions that we ask everybody, the same ones.
Okay.
So here we go. We have 5 for you today.
Okay.
So our first one is pen or pencil?
Ooh, pen. And I've just learned about erasable pens. My daughter taught me. I'm like, hook me up with one of those. Best of both worlds.
And they have come so far, like, right? It's not like the erasable pens that we had as kids
I
that,
know.
got
I
all
can't
over
even
your
believe
hands.
That's smudged.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
All
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Excel or PowerPoint?
Ooh, gosh. Depends for what. I would say neither or both, but I was kind of a Keynote girl. I got into Keynote. Is that a wrong
Nice.
answer?
No, that's, I mean, I put that in the PowerPoint category. Right.
You need to listen to our episode when I do the 5 rapid. I got I colored outside the lines on all of the questions.
Of course.
And then we force people to pick an answer so we can have stats at the end of these.
Well, I would say right now, Excel, because that is definitely helping me more in all ways.
Excellent. All right. Cats or dogs?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I like both. I can't pick. Come on, you're going to make me pick cats or dogs? They're cute and fluffy and soft and friendly. I don't want to have either of them in my home, but I love them both.
Nice. Salty or sweet?
Oh, salty. Definitely salty.
And then I always love that one because I always feel like, is it salty or sweet, like what you like to eat or your personality? And I feel like everybody interprets that question differently.
Okay, I would say salty on both.
Nice. Love it.
But I can be sweet.
You can
and
be sweet.
Our last one is adventure or relaxing vacation.
Oh, so hard. These are tough. Very tough. I actually have my mug here from my latest adventure vacation. I went to the Mont Blanc Trail, which is in the Alps. I hiked through Switzerland, Italy, and France. And that was one of the best vacations and trips I've ever been on. So
that's an adventure.
That's adventure phase of my life. Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Jen, for talking to us today. So if our listeners want to, continue to hear from you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Love Jen Oliver, and that's probably the best way to find me. Send me a DM and I will connect with you. I'm so excited.
Excellent. So you can follow us here at Embrace the Squiggle on Instagram and stay connected with both Kristine and I on LinkedIn and Instagram for some updates and additional insights. And don't forget to like and subscribe now to our podcast so you can embark on a transformative journey of professional discovery with us. Thanks again, Jen, for being here today. This was amazing.
Thank you, ladies, for letting me share. Thank you.
That was
Colleen.
so great. Thank you so much, Jen.
Is it time for you to add a little squiggle to your career? Join us every week to hear from another guest talk about how they embrace the squiggle.
Subscribe now and find your inspiration.